Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. I've been running for a few years now and have the privilege of meeting many incredible runners on my travels all across the country. This podcast is intended to share those amazing conversations. This week's episode is with Shalaya Kipp. Shalaya is a runner, Olympian, scientist, and current PhD student at the University of British Columbia. In this week's episode, which we recorded in Boulder, we went deep down the running nerd rabbit hole. We talked about the Nike 4% project, blood biomarkers and athletic performance and recovery, sponsorship as an elite athlete, her experience at the London Olympics in 2012, what gets her really excited in life, and much more. I hope you enjoy. All right, welcome back. I am here in Boulder, Colorado with Shalaya Kipp, who just raced the Boulder yesterday. So congrats on a great day out there.
Great. Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, thanks for having me. You're a longtime Boulder resident. So I guess welcome back.
Thank you.
So what was it like coming back to Boulder? You live out in Vancouver in British Columbia now.
Oh my gosh, this has been incredible coming home. So many people I know here. And then running yesterday, just all the people that cheer USA, and then the amount of people that knew my name and were, chanting Shalaya too. That was it was a pretty great feeling.
That's awesome. What's it like training in Boulder? I think one of the things that people enjoy with this podcast is hearing, and guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but hearing about the lives of high level athletes and sort of a behind the scenes look at it. So let's dig into that. What's it like, or what was it like living and training in Boulder?
Yeah. So I'll start with when I was still a senior in high school. I was going to be a freshman in college here at CU. I remember reading in Runner's World, there was a quote from Jenny Simpson, and she said, in Boulder, everyone and their grandma is an Olympian. And I remember thinking about that and being like, wow, Boulder sounds so cool. And then now to fast forward 8 years later and to really have lived all of that and seen what it's
and
like.
It's literally true.
It's literally true too. She wasn't like exaggerating or anything. But I mean, you show up for a Sunday long run and there's everyone. There's, the huge names, down to the people who are still trying to make it. Everyone's out there grinding. And even if you're not training with them, it's a sense of camaraderie in Boulder that you don't really get in other places, I think.
Definitely. What was it like coming into the stadium yesterday?
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, so the whole course is just lined with people.
Yeah.
So it's already been so loud.
And how many times have you run Boulder?
My second time running it. But I've been there for all of them, either in the stands, out in the course. But yeah, that roar of the crowd is so loud, especially when a USA athlete comes in. Definitely.
So yesterday after Caitlin Goodman finished, she told me, that felt like the Olympics. As someone who's been to the Olympics, how does a race like that compare?
Yeah. So Jared Ward and I were talking about this. It is louder than the Olympics. I know that's hard to imagine, but I mean, these people are there for one race and one race only, and to see, the Americans. So it's loud.
Cool. What was it like leading up to the Olympics in 2012?
Yeah. So 2012, I have to now rewind in my head. So I was a junior in college. I had just come off winning the NCAA steeple championship. And the Olympics had kind of been this thing in the back of my head that, hey, it's possible. But, I still felt like I'm the young baby of the field. Who knows? So leading up to it, it was really get through the collegiate career and then think, you got to take yourself seriously. You think someone else is going to make this? No, you can make this team. So, it was a step in believing in yourself that year.
Did you always have that confidence? I can do this?
Oh, absolutely not.
So where did that pie in the sky dream come from?
Yeah, I think it's something you build every day, right? You're laying a new brick every day, and you're building up to that, and it's the accumulation of many workouts, many races, that you start to see, hey, you're creating something great, and that's when that belief comes.
For sure. I had a coach who said that building fitness is like taking little tiny bricks and putting them in a wall, and one day you have a house.
I love it.
Yeah, and
exactly.
And it's just all about the process and the long-term approach.
It is, and it doesn't really matter what that house turns out to be. It's that whole process of building it.
Yeah, that's the fun part. What got you excited about running initially?
Got me excited about running. I joined cross country in middle school to make friends. So
community,
friends. That's why I did it. But no, really, it comes back to community. Why do you still do it?
Right.
It's the community. I just moved up to Vancouver, and I realized within like a week of moving, I needed to start running, mostly because I needed to meet people.
Right.
And running communities everywhere in the world. So you just start meeting Canadian runners.
Yeah.
You already have things in common.
Runners are friendly, but Canadian runners are a different breed.
Yeah, it's like double.
They're twice as friendly. What's the Vancouver running community like? I mean, besides super friendly.
Super friendly. And I'll actually elaborate on that. Natasha Woodcock is a professional Canadian runner up there. And she saw on my Instagram I'd moved up to Canada, and she reached out to me and she said, "Hey, you're a good runner. I'm a good runner. Let's go for a run." So one, not only reached out to me, two, she picked me up from my house and was like, "Let me show you where to actually run."
Cool.
So things like that. Yeah. Canadian runners, super friendly, super nice, take you on runs.
Awesome.
They're doing great.
And outside of running, you're a scientist. So let's hear a little bit more about that.
Yes, that's the reason I moved to Vancouver. As much as I love CU and I love Boulder, I needed to kind of spread my wings, grow my academic career a little bit more. So I just started my PhD up at the University of British Columbia. It's in kinesiology. It's kind of my field. I like physiology. I like to know what's happening to runners in particular, but any athletes during exercise. So yeah, that's where my scientific background is.
Cool. What got you interested in that initially?
It's really yourself, right? You want to know what's happening. You want to know what's happening inside your body. So I think kind of questions that a lot of athletes go through. And that's probably a reason a lot of athletes gravitate towards those sort of careers.
Got it. And you were part of an exciting study with the 4% shoe. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So up here at CU, Nike came to us in 2016 and they said, "Hey, we have these kind of cool prototype running shoes. Would you guys be willing to be, an external tester, test them for us?" So we said, okay. And this is through my PI at the time, Roger Crom. And we thought, okay, what are you going to test these shoes against? Do you want the best marathon shoes out there? Because this was going to be a marathon prototype running shoe. So we chose the Nike Streak and the Adidas Boost. And we looked at just the energetic cost of running. So how much energy did runners expend when running in these different shoes? And incredibly, in all 18 athletes we tested, every single one of them saved an average of 4%. Thus, Nike ended up using that 4% number and called the shoe the Nike Vaporfly 4%.
Cool. So many of these podcasts turn into consults. And I'm going to take this opportunity to do so. Okay. So I ran a marathon a couple weeks ago, and I had a massive PR, and ran harder and faster than I'd ever run before. I ran in the 4%. I had run 5 marathons prior, and this one was like the best training I've had, the best build up, and the best executed race. And I walked away from the race like feeling like I could go for a run again later that day, even, and the next day, and the day after that. How much of that is training, and how much of that is the shoe? I ran the 4%. Is that an expected outcome?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I think a lot of people want to tease that apart. So the first thing is people say, "I put on this new shoe. How much is that contributing to my new time?"
Right.
We don't really know.
Right.
One, we don't know. We can't make your training the exact same as it was running those other marathons. We don't know where that savings is coming from. Another thing that I think people forget is we know that this 4% savings of energy happens when we test people for 5 minutes. How that saving looks over, 2.5, 3 hours, we don't know. Are you still saving as much? Are the benefits less? Or are the benefits, maybe more if there's less muscle damage happening? I think the jury's still out. What happens to running economy over the long duration of the race? People say it gets better. Some people say it gets worse. Some people say it doesn't change. The literature is really mixed.
So it was fascinating because I had some blood data on post-marathon results.
Awesome.
And the hsCRP was high, but not nearly as high as prior marathons. Okay. The creatine kinase was nearly optimal.
Should we let listeners know what we're talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about Insight Tracker blood testing, blood analysis. And
creatine kinase being a marker of how much muscle damage has occurred. This is leaked out into the bloodstream. So kind of your indicator of how much damage you did during the race.
And that's more of an acute measure, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Versus the HSCRP, is that also acute or is that more long-term?
Maybe more long-term. I'm not a blood expert.
And then the liver enzymes were also not quite as high, definitely not as high, but still elevated. And then other values were significantly better. So I have that compared to 2 other marathons where I didn't run in the 4%.
That's fantastic. You did the blood work right after each of your marathons.
Yeah, so 2 days post and 3 days post.
Oh man.
Yeah, I'll send you the data.
More people need to do that.
Yes. But it was fascinating because I was able to see that like physiologically this race was not as punishing despite running like right around my fitness.
Yeah.
And PRing by 20 minutes. So,
and that's kind of what you hear from a lot of people. They put on these Vaporfly 4% and they say, next day I don't really feel as bad, they can get back to training sooner. So maybe another benefit of the shoe.
Yeah. And again, this isn't an ad for the 4%. We're just asking the questions here. So
I'm not sponsored by Nike.
So speaking of sponsors, you've had a handful of sponsors in the past with support that has led you and supported you over the years. Do you want to talk a little bit about who has helped you in the past and sort of where you're at today?
Sure. So like I just said, I'm not currently sponsored, but I have had some fantastic sponsors in the past, some great partnerships. Wazel got me through the 2016 Olympics. Afterwards, we parted ways, just different financial constraints on the company. And I think after that, when there wasn't more sponsorship opportunities, I really did start to focus more on my academic career. Where am I going, long-term post-running? And so it didn't really become this thing I wanted to focus on. I said, if you get a contract, there's so many races you have to do, so many obligations. And, a life stress is a life stress.
Right.
If I want to focus, on being a scientist, I need to push running back a little bit. So I'm kind of okay with it by this point.
And at the time, what was it like managing sponsorship obligations and still staying true to that you shouldn't race a ton and things like that?
Exactly. I mean, one is you're trying to be a professional athlete with all these other women that, go do their workout and then immediately they're at home, they have their smoothie, they're in their Normatec boots. And instead I remember running from workouts and literally going into the lab, and then I might have a lecture and I needed to teach a class. And then, oh wait, I haven't eaten lunch yet. And so I was being a terrible athlete.
Yeah. But still performing at a high level.
As much as I could.
Right.
And so I kind of understood, it's not even fair to a sponsor if this is,
right.
what I'm doing. So kind of, I was being lenient on myself, I thought more, focus on the academic career. And if I'm still having fun with running, let's still do it. Let's still do the boulder. Let's still do the races that work.
Nice. And so are you of the, are you the type of person that takes your knowledge and expertise and applies it to your own training, or do you need an expert, another expert to help with those insights? Some people seem to be able to coach themselves in that way, and some people, have the blinders on.
Yeah. So I'd say when I was at CU, I just wanted the blinders on. Just tell me what to do.
Yep.
I don't want to think too much about it. I'm not going to question the coach. That's what an athlete should do, right? Now I'm up in Vancouver. I am self-coaching myself. I sit down once a week. I'm Coach Shalaya. I write out what I'm going to do. I know why I'm doing it. And then come the day of the workout, I don't question myself. I do what's on that piece of paper. I might have different variations if I need to tweak something. But I try to be very dichotomous. Just I'm either the athlete or the coach now. So yeah, in that respect, my physiology has spilled over to guidance.
How often do you pull the plug on a workout?
Oh, probably more often than people would think.
Yeah.
There's some days you feel crappy. My life is stressful. I'll pull a plug on it, or I will write variations. You're going to only do 6 to 8 of these reps. Okay, if you can't hit this pace, I still want the same number of those intervals, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's key. I think going back to that building a house brick by brick example, you can miss a brick or two and the house will still stand.
Exactly, right? Yeah.
Do you coach any other athletes?
Nope. No, just myself. My husband jokes that I coach him. I'll tell him what we're doing.
Yeah.
He'll pace me a lot. But no, it's just me. That's all I can focus on.
Do you think at some point you'll want to do that?
I've never really had a huge desire to coach. Mostly because I think a lot of it is, I'm a scientist. I like very controlled experiments. I like
you can control yourself.
variable.
Yeah.
When you start throwing in real life, there's things you can't control. People have other things in their life. There's a whole psychological aspect. There's things like that. I don't think I'm ready to handle coaching other people.
Makes sense. Where do you think running Shalaya and scientist Shalaya will be in the next 5 years?
Oh man. Hopefully they both still exist. Let's start with that.
Yes. Assuming that holds true. Knock on wood.
Yeah. In 5 years, I hope I've at least completed my PhD, maybe started a postdoc. And then I hope I am still running. Let's see, 5 years from now, I'd be 32, almost 33. I've probably moved to some of those longer distances. I'm having fun playing around with road races right now, kind of dipping my toe in those. Maybe more half marathons. I could see marathons in my long-term future.
Have you run one before?
No, I haven't even run a half marathon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think that's way too long.
Well, it depends how fast you are.
Yeah, but
let's talk recovery from someone who I'm sure has experimented with a bunch of things and knows it from the science side of or perspective. What are some recovery modalities that you think are overused?
Oh man.
Let's start with ice baths. Thoughts?
Oh man. Oh geez, you're really throwing these at me. Okay, so ice baths. First, I'd say if you do something and you like it, keep doing it. The chances that you're actually hurting yourself are pretty slim. Some people aren't proponents of ice baths due to the idea that you are clearing away this inflammation that might be actually necessary and useful for getting rid of metabolites and other excess byproducts. But it's probably still a bit okay, right? The whole idea of recovery is that you're kind of thinking about what you're doing. You're not going and running around a bunch. You're not standing on your feet all day. If you're actively pursuing recovery methods, you're probably already doing something right.
So let's talk about easy versus rest versus some other form of active recovery. I think a lot of people are of the mindset that like they just have to run more and run harder and race every workout. Where is that line and how do you explain it to an athlete that doesn't grasp the fact that like you recover when you're not pushing at 100% all the time?
Yeah, it's kind of how do you teach them? You can't just keep digging this hole and digging this hole. And I'd say one of the best things that happened to me when I started my professional career was Jenny Simpson moved back to Boulder, and I went on an easy day with her. Mm-hmm. And, you're kind of getting ready. You're like, oh, Jenny invited me to go on an easy day. Okay, better be ready. And we literally ran over 8-minute pace the whole time. And it was just kind of this aha moment, like, oh, we really do have to go this easy,
right,
if we want to be able to go hard 2 days from now. So it's kind of a hard thing to articulate into words, but it's something you have to learn, or you have to experience it once to make yourself go really easy and then feel how good you can be recovered for those next days.
Definitely. I love asking pros this question because it can go one of two ways. One, they'll know their pace, or two, they'll just say, I talked to Reed Buchanan on Sunday, and he was like, he's awesome. And he was like, man, I don't care what my easy pace is. It's just easy. And if you're looking at splits on an easy run, you're not going easy enough. And then compare that to, I talked with the guy named Tyler Andrews, who, he runs a lot of very fast 50Ks. So he's running a 50K at like a 5:20 pace, which to me is incomprehensible. And he's running his easy runs at, 7:30 to 8. And there are plenty of amateur runners that are running their easy runs at 7 flat. And I think that the more we can hear that someone like yourself or someone like Reed or Tyler or Jenny or any of these people, people are just slowing down to go fast. I think that's a good thing.
I would love how you see a lot of runners post when they're doing tempos or something. I'd love for us all to post us running an easy day. Just to get an idea of how slow we can actually make that.
So I joke with Anna Mae Flynn, who's a pro runner, pro trail runner, and she lives out in Marble, Colorado. So she's at like, I don't know, 9,000 feet, 10,000 feet. And she's like, I'm pushing 10:30 pace on my easy days. It's like, let's brag about how slow we can go. Yeah. And like also acknowledge that like for some 10:30 is fast. So it's all relative, but I love the idea of posting not just our
speed days,
exactly,
but look how slow we can actually jog it in.
Yeah, and the demarcate or the delta between your tempo pace and your easy pace being 2 minutes. Yeah. Let's see more of that.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say you also do rest day brags, which important
thing
is rest day nothing.
Exactly.
I think people need to see that we actually take those days sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just know you need that.
Yeah.
Means no cross training, no easy day, just be a regular NARP or something.
I took 3 rest days last week, and I made a silly decision with a shoe that I probably shouldn't have worn, and I was having a little ache, and it was killing me that like I took one planned rest day, and then a second unplanned rest day, and then a third unplanned rest day. And I didn't even think about that going to the race, actually. I was kind of nervous during like when it was happening, but it's just an example of like, you're not going to lose all your fitness in 1 week.
And that's the thing you just have to get through your head, because everyone thinks that, oh my gosh, the one day I missed,
right.
What's that doing to my training? No, it's probably not going to do anything.
For sure. What are some other tips you have from a recovery standpoint?
From a recovery standpoint, I would say one, probably food right away is something that we all know, but we forget. You really do have this kind of 30-minute window where you can increase glycogen storage. You have extra receptors still up in your muscle cells. So if you do remember to eat, you're actually getting a little more benefit. So first point, eat when you're done. Don't wait. Don't decide you're going to chat with your teammates for an hour and then drive home and then shower, and now 2.5 hours has passed. Tip 2, you do a hard workout, you're in sweaty clothes, change out of those clothes. That's not really recovery, is that?
It's just general cleanliness.
I'm my own little tangent now. General stuff.
Just life recommendations.
Well, then we get to hygiene, right? Because then I think you're sick, you can't train, things like that.
What about this athleisure trend where you can wear your clothes that you ran in right to the bar?
Well, then you need dry clothes. It's fine to wear athleisure to the bar. But...
I'm just kidding. Let's talk about altitude.
Okay.
What was it like coming back to Boulder?
I think I was so kind of immersed with all my friends, and I was really hyped up on all that energy that I didn't notice it until you reach like mile 4, and it reminds you you're at like 5,300 feet, and you're like, oh yeah, this is a little harder. Definitely miss being acclimatized to altitude.
What are some of the things that you've done or you did while you're here to help with altitude?
Living here would be the biggest.
Move to Colorado.
Moving to Colorado.
I always joke that like this trip is like a recruiting tour.
Yeah, probably remembering that when you're at altitude, you need to drink more water. Iron for females becomes increasingly important. So one, blood work for someone living at altitude or going to altitude is important. Before just deciding to randomly supplement with iron. Yeah, those would be my big 2.
Cool. Yeah, eat and drink more. It's a great
eat and drink more.
Great recommendation.
Right. You're going to be burning more carbohydrates. You're going to also be urinating more.
A good old pee test.
Good old pee test is always good.
I was out in Flagstaff, and I was meeting with Ben Bruce, and we were walking up from the track at the Northern Arizona indoor stadium, and we get to the top of the stairs, and I'm like completely spent. And I just fired off a question to him, just expecting him to like talk for 2 minutes so I could catch my breath. And I was so embarrassed. I couldn't talk after going up the stairs. And it's amazing that like altitude can have that impact on you, but you can still race really hard. It's just fascinating.
You definitely can, right? Yeah.
What gets you really excited?
What gets me really excited? Like on a day-to-day training? Or...
Yeah.
Ooh, okay. So actually, putting races on the calendar really helps.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So in Vancouver, there's this warm-up route my husband and I take. And part of the reason I like it is we always see this older lady. She's maybe in her late 70s, early 80s. And I tell my husband every time that we pass her, I'm like, that's going to be me someday.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
That's something that gets me kind of going, right? Like, I want to be that person. And so, yeah, in a sense, just the motivational people.
The long-term, yeah.
The long-term goals.
There are these two older Asian ladies that run around the river in Boston, or the Charles River. They're like, I don't know, 80 years old. And so anyone that runs in Boston probably knows who I'm talking about. They dress the same. They wear the same matching jackets. It's amazing. And they say hi to everyone. And it's like, I want to be that sustained. Yeah.
When you see those kind of people.
Exactly. What's your, so how are you going to do that? How do you maintain the joy long term?
Yeah. One of the things is not burning yourself out, right? If you're constantly getting injured, you're probably going to burn yourself out. If you only have these kind of short-term goals and you think, oh my gosh, I'm putting all my eggs in this basket in this race that's right in front of me, it's not going to be fun. So it kind of reminds me just to keep the sport fun. Why do I want to do it? There's kind of this long-term picture I want to be to. It's not up, in the next race or in the next Olympic cycle. It's kind of, who am I as a runner in the long term?
Nice. What's your take on balance?
On balance?
Yeah.
Like doing balance exercises?
No, like balance in life.
Balancing life.
Yeah.
Right. See, I take the very literal meaning.
Well, we can get back to the exercise physiology part. How do you feel about balance on a Bosu ball? No, I'm kidding. Balance in life.
Yeah, no, that's part of the important part, right? If you don't have a balanced life, you're not going to be that 80-year-old woman at the end of the day that's still out there running, smiling. But at the same time, what are the goals? Do you want to do well in the race? Balance is probably something unique for everyone because it depends on what their, personal, professional goals are, what their family goals are, and then what their running goals are and how they want to weight each of those, because it doesn't have to be a third. But for sure, if you're putting 100% on just one thing and zero in the rest of the baskets, you don't have a balance, and burnout is highly likely.
So it's fascinating to ask this question because half of the responses are that, and the other half are, I just go all in on 3 to 5 things, and that's how it works for me in terms of the other half of how people answer it, and I think it's cool that like it's what works for you, like you said earlier. Figure out what works for you and lean into that. So it's cool that there are a couple options there.
I already told you I'm a terrible professional athlete, right? I want to be doing these other things.
Yeah.
I have other goals.
So as someone that's been to a couple of Olympics, what recommendations do you have for someone who's maybe not training for something that aspirational? I don't mean that in a bad way. Something that
it's their
high,
goal.
right? Yeah. Something that's relatable to them. Something, their pie in the sky, their Olympics, their whatever it is. What would you say to that athlete?
I would say if this is going to be your pie in the sky goal, it's okay to go all in. Don't feel guilty about saying no to friends and being asleep by 8 o'clock. If you have these goals and it's not going to be for your whole life, then take a risk. Do some of those things just to make that goal happen. And it's probably good to have those goals in your life. Those are the goals that you get really scared for. Those are the races that the nerves are just, crawling under your skin and you can't sleep. And part of me thinks it's a healthy experience to have.
Yeah, getting really uncomfortable, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Let's talk about that. What's it like? So you race the steeplechase, and you've done up to the 10K. Those are pretty painful experiences, right?
Those are painful. What race isn't painful?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think they all are. I can't think of any distance. It's not pain. Yeah. So how do you manage a race like a 10K?
I'd say one thing I actually do before almost all of my races is I write out my race plan, but it's more like, this is you're going to be kind of tucked in, first mile. And then I always write about the pain I'm going to be experiencing. Mm-hmm. I want to get that through my head that I'm going to that dark, hurtful place. And there's something about writing it out, remembering what that pain feels like before going in, makes it a little easier to get there.
So an earlier episode of this podcast was with Adrienne Langelier, who's a sports psychology consultant. And that's exactly what she said. She's like, you must accept that it's going to be painful, and you must anticipate it and welcome it in, because then you own it.
And you have to remind yourself before every race.
Yeah.
Like, you'd think by now I know, but it's like, let's really
this is gonna hurt.
That.
And when you crest into the stadium, that's when it really hurts.
Oh my gosh, it hurts so bad, but you're so excited and you're trying to enjoy it. But I'm also like, I need to make sure I cross that line.
Yeah.
And I don't collapse before.
Yeah, so it's fascinating with a race like Boulder or with something like that where you've run the course before and you know what's coming, and so you can prepare for it. And so as I was making that turn, I knew, like, welcome to the hurt locker, because this is gonna get real painful. And it was way easier than it was last year when it was completely unknown.
I think people underestimate how important it is to know the course. It's something so simple. It doesn't take you too much time. Go out and drive it, maybe jog part of it for a cool down, especially the finish. And it's actually pretty useful come that time you're in that hurtful place.
Yeah. Do you practice visualization at all?
I do. I will normally sit down. That really kind of, get away from everyone else, close your eyes. And I do think about it. I won't remember all the turns always. But it kind of reminds you, okay, I'm going to be in a pack at this part. There's going to be elbows around me. And then also sometimes in races, remembering I'm going to be in a pack and I might be actually really hurting, and I might really be trying to hold on to a place and kicking with someone that last kilometer. So visualizing those kind of things.
Cool.
I do that.
Yeah, I think particularly for a race that has, I mean, you can't do it for a race like this where it has, it seems like 50 turns, but the turns into substantial changes or things like that can definitely be helpful.
Those are the things that you're trying to remember.
My coach's guidance for the last mile was race people and pick them off, and I like to think about it as eat them up. And so in that last mile, how many people can you just eat up?
I love it.
Yeah. And it's a way to definitely take your mind off of, like, oh, this is painful, and turn it into something positive. Yeah, a game, exactly. I was reading a book called Mind Gym, and it talked about how, like, it's very simple. Like, you can focus on one thing at a time. If you focus on something negative, you will have negative thoughts and you will have negative results. And if you focus on something positive, the opposite. You'll think of positive stuff. So I think it's fascinating how much the mental side of it can play into success.
Oh, for sure, right? It's not just physiology, it's psychology. It's kind of this beautiful combination of both of them.
Have you ever worked with a sports psychologist?
Yes, I have. They've had a couple on Olympic teams.
Mm-hmm.
I really actually liked them. They're very, come use this as much as you want. They don't try to push things in your face.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, I worked with a psychologist, and I did really well after the Pan American Games. She said, go either write it down or do a voice recording and remind yourself what this feeling feels like. Remind yourself how good it feels to win. And then when training gets really hard, play that back to yourself. Remember what you're training for. And I really like that advice.
That's awesome. Do you write your goals out in a place that you can see them?
I have in the past. I haven't been as good lately. I have calendars right up in front of my desk, and I do have races circled. And sometimes I will write goal times. That's as much as I'm doing goal setting right now.
Cool. So the podcast is, the basis of this podcast is exploring the why behind what keeps runners motivated and running long and strong and excited over the long haul. What would you say is your why?
My why is still, I mean, I think I kind of already said this, but the reason I'm doing this is just to see how long I can be a runner for. I want to be challenging myself at, every stage of my life. I don't want to be one of those runners that, announces retirement. I don't really understand what that means.
And those runners all still run.
They all still run.
Or some of them.
So it's kind of this why is I'm doing it because I just love it. I'm not doing it to, really see, how fast can I do it? How many times can I make an Olympic team? I'm doing it because it's fun. It's my community. It's something I want to be part of. So I'm doing it to stay with my family.
Nice. What are some tips that you wish you could tell yourself 10 years ago? Oh,
probably the biggest one is be patient. I think younger me didn't really understand that this is a lifetime sport. I was really upset I had to redshirt my freshman year. And thinking about that now, I'm like, that was the best decision the coaches could have made for me. I wasn't ready yet to compete in college. So patience. I mean, and that could be, even with running a marathon, you think I want to, hit this time, and needing to understand it might take, 2 or 3 years of training before you can actually get to this level you want.
Yeah, I think that's another point that a lot of people need to hear. In the conversation I had with Reed, he basically, I guess he had a conversation with his coach, and he said, look, I'm not going to be good this year. I'm not going to be good next year.
And a good coach should understand.
Right. I'm going to be good in 3 years. Yeah. And if you can accept that, let's do it. And he's been doing well. And conversation I had with Peter Bromka on a prior episode of the podcast, we were talking about goal setting, and he said, you can't have these 1-year goals. They have to be long term. You can't BQ in a year. You can't OTQ in a year. You can't X in a year. So how do you rectify the need that we have as humans for short-term gratification and match that with long-term progress?
So the first thing I'd point out is it's these successful runners that realize that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see a lot of people move to Boulder, Colorado, because they want to make it, and they only spend a year here. It's not going to happen then. Okay, but back to rectifying having a 1-year goal. I think that's fine. Just make sure it's a stepping stone goal. Make sure it's not your pie in the sky goal. Then it's fine.
Cool. Are there any? So what's the pie in the sky goal that you have in the next few years? Is it really just I want to run and be happy and enjoy the process for as long as possible? Because if so, I love that.
Yeah. So I'd say I'm one person. My goals right now are probably more academic focused. Running's still there, right? I've just shifted pots around on the stove. Running's now on the back burner. That back burner's still on, but I'm looking at the goals up front, and maybe they're not running related, but I'm still looking at those running goals.
Cool. What's getting you excited in the academic world?
Oh man, so I'm in a new department. I'm looking more at respiratory physiology. In the past, I've done more shoe stuff, more biomechanics. So I'm exploring new territory, and I'm enjoying that. I think my advisor already knows that I want it to still be running related. I kind of commandeered a treadmill and brought it into our lab because there were no treadmills, and so I think he got the hint. I want to do some running research. Yeah, so I'm
subtle, very subtle.
Very subtle. Hey,
There's a treadmill.
Why is there a treadmill in here?
I'm just making the most of my lunch break.
Yeah.
What are some other projects you've been a part of or studies you've been a part of that got you really excited?
Oh man. So when I first came to see you, I was working in a research lab, and one of the professors up here, Roger Crom, caught hold of the fact I'm a steeplechaser. And he goes, would you be interested in doing a steeplechase project? And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool.
So do you want to explain the steeplechase for those that don't know?
Yeah, so the steeplechase is the weirdest track and field event you can imagine. It's kind of like the distance hurdles. There are these big block barriers. They have black and white stripes. Maybe you've seen them. There's 5 of them per lap, and one of them is followed by a 12-foot pit of water. That pit of water is 2 feet deep and then tapers all the way up to the top of the track.
And where did this come from?
You hear it comes from cross country. You hear it comes from running from a steeple to a steeple point. It comes from the horse racing. I don't know, some sort of combination of all these things. And they thought this would make a good track event.
All right. So you were presented with the opportunity to be a part of a steeplechase study.
Yeah. And he said, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we could figure it out. So we ended up making these force measuring steeplechase barriers. We took, the first one was, we have a runway that goes through the lab, and we put a force plate in front of the hurdle and on the other side of the hurdle, with the idea that we'd get how much force an individual is exerting on the ground when they take off, and then how much force they exert when they land. So we did that over regular hurdling. And then we made a faux water jump. So it was a waterless water jump. Force plates.
Sounds painful.
Very expensive, and they can't get wet. And what this was still taking that takeoff step. For a water jump, you put your foot onto a barrier, so that barrier was mounted onto a force plate. And then they landed on the incline into an empty long jump pit. So we removed the sand, we built a ramp, and we put our force plate there. And so that actually got me really excited. One of the biggest findings we found was when individuals land from a water jump, they can exert up to 7 times their body weight on their foot. And that's substantial.
That's a lot of weight.
You got to think regular running's 2 to 3 times. So what you do during steepling, it's not,
because you're coming down. You're coming from what, like 3+ feet?
Yeah, it's 30 inches for a woman, 36 for a man. So
wow.
Yeah.
So runners are at risk for stress fractures and bone issues and things like that.
It's not just, the amount of force it is. It's also kind of where on their foot they're landing. You almost always land on your metatarsal area. Yeah. So that can be a high amount of force.
So was the goal to then help with shoes, or what was the...
So the goal at the time was just really more to quantify it. Mm-hmm. Nike did see some of this research, and they asked me what they would change in a steeple shoe. And I said, you need more cushioning under the midsole for, a steepler. And they did make a couple of versions of a shoe, and they had me try it out, and it was fantastic. Unfortunately, it's a very, very small market, and they didn't go any further with that.
Got it. So have you had an impact on other shoes as well?
What do you mean by having an impact?
Well, I don't mean in the pun.
Yeah, I know, that's how I'm confused. I'm like, I took balance literally, so.
Meaning providing feedback to a company, objective data to provide insights on how to modify a shoe based on what you've learned in the lab.
Yeah, so sometimes it's hard because they want to ask athlete Shalaya what she thought, but then scientist Shalaya says, here's quantitatively what we measured, here's what we know. So I'll give both feedbacks. I don't know how much I actually influence as one individual, but
yeah, I mean, if they're asking, if they're asking, they must be using it. Is that a direction that you find fascinating in terms of impacting actual products that other athletes can use?
I really like the more scientific, objective, controlled experiment in the lab. Mm-hmm. And I realize that is kind of far away from what happens actually out in the field when an athlete uses it, right? We test shoes on treadmills. That's very just monotonous, same strike over and over again. People don't run on treadmills to race. They run on a curved track. They run on roads, hills, up, down. So I'd say I'm still kind of more towards the basic science part of that than actually influencing the end product. Got it.
If you could design your dream job from an educational or scientific standpoint, what does that look like? And your eyes just lit up.
Yeah, because I'm like, I don't even know if that exists.
Well, put it out there, pie in the sky.
Job. Oh yeah, I can put it out in the universe.
Yeah. Maybe someone who's listening can help.
Yeah, I don't really know. Like I said earlier, I'm kind of entering a new domain of exercise physiology for me, and I'm liking playing around with that. I don't know what I'm going to end up studying, and that's almost what's exciting, right? Yeah. I'm not going to be, the person studying shoes for the rest of my life. Right. I want to move around, learning about what the work of breathing is, and these new things to me that I hadn't thought about before. And I think, well, how does the work of breathing, your respiratory muscles also fatigue? I'm normally only thinking about leg fatigue, but what's the diaphragm doing? So things like that. It's hard for me to say what my dream career could be because I'm still learning.
It sounds like you're kind of in it though.
As long as I'm doing something exercise, physiology related, I can still be a runner. and I'm still kind of pioneering new questions and still thinking with a scientific mind, I think then I'm going to be happy.
That's awesome. I feel like that's a good place to wrap up. Where can people find you on social media?
So when I decide to come and actually talk on social media, I'm at Shalaya Kipp on Twitter, and I'm at Shalaya Kipp on Instagram. And
very simple and easy.
Yeah.
There we go. Thanks for chatting today, Shalaya.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Of course. That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.